The 97th Academy Awards were a huge night in Hollywood. Celebrities walked the red carpet, posed for cameras, and smiled for fans. But behind the glamour, something unusual was going on inside the Dolby Theater. A seating chart was leaked online just hours before the show began. Fans noticed something strange right away. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt were supposed to sit next to each other. It had been years since the two had been seen together in public. Their divorce and custody battles had been widely covered in the media, and since then, they had gone their separate ways. So the idea of them sitting side by side at one of the biggest events of the year felt shocking to many. Social media exploded with comments. Some people were curious, others were confused, and a few thought it was all planned by the event organizers to stir drama. When Angelina arrived at the Oscars, she looked calm and graceful as always. She wore a long black gown that turned heads, but her face was serious. She didn't stop for many interviews or photos. Instead, she walked straight toward the theater entrance. An usher met her at the door and guided her to her seat. That's when she paused. She looked at the seat with her name on it and noticed Brad Pitt's name right next to hers. For a moment, she just stood there. Then she leaned in and quietly spoke to the usher. No one could hear what she said, but it was clear she wasn't comfortable with the arrangement. Without causing a scene, she was politely moved to a different seat a few rows away. People nearby noticed, but Angelina kept her composure. She didn't look angry or upset. She simply chose not to sit next to her ex-husband, and she did it in a respectful way. Brad Pitt hadn't arrived yet, so he had no idea what just happened. The audience was still settling in. Cameras were rolling, but they missed this quiet exchange. However, a few fans inside the theater began posting about it online. Angelina just switched seats. One post said, "She was supposed to sit next to Brad." Nope. The buzz started to grow. Reporters backstage began checking the seating chart again. Everyone was waiting to see Brad Pitt's reaction once he arrived and saw the empty seat beside him. Angelina sat quietly in her new spot, speaking softly with her assistant. She looked focused, not bothered. It was clear she wanted the night to be about films and performances, not old memories. Still, it was too late to stop the rumors. The internet had already picked up the story, and fans were ready to watch every moment closely. No one knew what would happen next, but one thing was certain: the Oscars had just become a lot more interesting. Angelina Jolie entered the Oscars quietly, with the same elegance that had made her a Hollywood icon. The night was about the stars and their achievements, yet there was something noticeably different about her arrival. Unlike many of the other stars who were stopped by reporters on the red carpet, she moved with purpose and barely acknowledged the photographers. She wasn't rushing, but her calm demeanor told a story of someone who wasn't here for the spotlight. She wore a stunning black velvet gown that flowed behind her as she walked, but her expression remained serious and focused. Her eyes didn't meet the cameras or the excited faces of fans. She was a professional, prepared for the night, but not interested in giving anything away. As Angelina reached the entrance to the Dolby Theater, she briefly paused to speak with a member of the event staff. There was nothing unusual about this. Celebrities often checked in with their handlers or assistants. However, something about this moment felt different. She spoke with the staff member in a low voice, and they exchanged a few words. Moments later, it became clear why Angelina had paused. The usher led her down the aisles of the theater, heading toward her seat. As they walked, she glanced at the name cards placed on the seats. When they reached her designated spot, something caught her attention. Her seat was placed next to none other than Brad Pitt's. Her face didn't show any immediate reaction, but it was evident that she was not comfortable with this arrangement. The Oscars were supposed to be a night of celebration, and despite any past tension, no one wanted the spotlight on personal drama. Angelina wasn't about to make a scene. She quietly leaned toward the usher and asked if she could be moved to another seat. The usher nodded and led her to a different row, a few seats away from her ex-husband. Angelina's decision was made without causing a stir. She didn't raise her voice or act out. She simply wanted to avoid an uncomfortable situation. By the time Brad Pitt arrived, she was seated elsewhere, making her presence barely noticeable to anyone paying close attention. What was interesting was how calm and composed she appeared. It wasn't that she was avoiding Brad because of anger or bitterness. She was there for the event, just like everyone else. She didn't want to create unnecessary drama or make the night about their past. The Oscars were about celebrating achievements, and she was determined to focus on that. As Angelina sat in her new seat, she began to chat with the people around her, quietly engaging in conversation. She didn't seem fazed by the seating change. In fact, she looked relaxed and content, like she had made the best decision for herself and for the evening. The cameras continued to roll, but for now she was just one of the many stars at the event, focused and ready for the night ahead. Little did anyone know her quiet decision would spark a much bigger conversation online. But for now, she remained the picture of grace under pressure. The atmosphere inside the Dolby Theater was buzzing as the Oscars ceremony went on. Celebrities were laughing, chatting, and enjoying the night. However, there was a sense that something unusual had happened earlier when Angelina Jolie quietly moved away from her designated seat next to Brad Pitt. Most people hadn't noticed, but a few keen-eyed observers saw her move and began talking about it among themselves. They whispered about why she had made the change, but no one outside of the immediate area knew exactly why. What made this even more interesting was the fact that when Brad Pitt arrived and took his seat, he appeared unaware of the change. He greeted a few colleagues and made small talk with those nearby. When he finally took his seat, he looked around and seemed to be searching for someone. It wasn't long before he realized that his ex-wife wasn't sitting next to him as expected. But he didn't seem upset or confused. Instead, he simply adjusted, settled into his seat, and prepared to enjoy the evening. Meanwhile, the cameras kept rolling, capturing the most glamorous moments of the night. The audience saw Brad Pitt giving his usual friendly smiles, but there was no obvious sign that he was bothered by Angelina's absence from the seat beside him. It seemed as if both ex-spouses were determined to keep the focus on the evening's celebration of film and not their past. Backstage, however, the situation was a little different. Rumors spread quickly among staff members, and some were curious about why Angelina had made the request to move. According to a few insiders, her decision to be reseated wasn't out of anger or an attempt to avoid Brad, but simply a way to maintain her own comfort and focus on the event. She didn't want the drama of their past to overshadow the Oscars or take away from her presence as a professional actress. While the cameras were focused on the main event, a small but telling moment took place. During a break in the ceremony, Angelina made her way to the other side of the room. She approached Jennifer Aniston, who was seated not far from her. The two exchanged a quick but intimate conversation. Angelina leaned in slightly, speaking quietly into Jennifer's ear. The moment was brief, but those watching closely could see the warmth in their exchange. Although no one could overhear what was said, it was clear that the two women shared a friendly connection. Their conversation wasn't filled with tension or awkwardness. Instead, it appeared like a peaceful and genuine moment between two people who had learned to move past their respective histories. It was a surprising but welcome sign that the Hollywood drama fans often expect might not always be what it seemed. As the evening went on, the whispers continued, but Angelina remained composed. She wasn't interested in making the Oscars about anything other than the movies and the achievements of the night. Yet the question remained. What had she said to Jennifer? The mystery of that quiet conversation would soon capture the public's attention. As the night continued at the 97th Academy Awards, the cameras flashed on the stage, capturing the stars and their reactions to the biggest moments. Brad Pitt sat in his seat, a few rows ahead of where Angelina Jolie had been reseated. He was relaxed and friendly, chatting with the people around him, but there was a subtle change in his behavior as the evening went on. When Brad first arrived, he didn't seem to notice anything unusual. His attention was on the event, and he smiled for the photographers, greeting familiar faces. However, when he finally settled into his seat, he glanced to his left. It was at that moment he realized that his ex-wife, who was supposed to be seated next to him, wasn't there. Instead, there was an empty seat where she was supposed to be. Brad paused for a moment. His face didn't show confusion or frustration, but there was a slight flicker of surprise. It wasn't a big reaction, just a brief pause and a quick look around, almost as if he was expecting to see her sitting there. But when he didn't, he simply shrugged it off and turned back to the stage. There was no visible sign of anger or discomfort. It was as if he had accepted that this was the way things were now, and the past was something he wasn't going to dwell on tonight. Throughout the evening, Brad stayed focused on the event. He laughed and clapped during the performances, exchanged words with fellow nominees, and seemed genuinely happy for the winners. His usual easygoing attitude didn't change, even though some people in the audience were curious about his reaction to the seating change. It was as if he had expected it in a way, or at least wasn't going to let it ruin his night. His behavior showed that he was there for the Oscars, not for personal drama. As the ceremony went on, Brad was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The camera often cut to him as he waited for the results, looking calm and collected. When his name was finally announced as the winner, the applause was loud, and Brad stood up with a smile, clapping for the other nominees. He made his way to the stage, thanked the audience, and delivered a heartfelt acceptance speech. There was no mention of personal matters, no hint of anything that could have distracted from the moment. In the back of his mind, though, Brad likely knew that the attention would soon shift back to his past with Angelina, especially after her quiet decision to be reseated. But he didn't allow that to affect his focus. Instead, he was determined to enjoy the night and embrace the honor of the award. His calm and collected reaction showed that for him, the Oscars were about celebrating his craft and the work of those around him. As Brad left the stage with his Oscar in hand, he gave a friendly wave to the audience, maintaining the same relaxed attitude that had defined his night. While some may have wondered if he and Angelina would ever reconcile their differences, on that particular evening, it was clear that both of them were handling things with a sense of professionalism and grace. As the night continued at the Oscars, another moment quietly unfolded that many didn't expect. After Angelina Jolie moved to a different seat, the cameras mostly followed the glitz and glamour on stage. But there was one moment that stood out to those who were watching closely: the brief exchange between Angelina and Jennifer Aniston. The two actresses, once known for their very public and complicated history, had not been seen together in years. But on this night, they were seated near each other. Jennifer Aniston was only a few rows ahead of Angelina, and when a break in the ceremony came, something unexpected happened. Angelina, calm as ever, made her way over to Jennifer's seat. The audience around them was busy with their own conversations and didn't notice the quiet interaction taking place. But a few eagle-eyed fans in the crowd caught the moment as Angelina leaned in toward Jennifer. For a few seconds, the two exchanged words in what appeared to be a very private conversation. The whispers that followed were loud. Many were curious about what was said, especially after the years of tension between Angelina, Jennifer, and Brad. Some fans speculated that maybe it was a simple greeting, while others thought it could be something more significant. But the truth is, no one knew for sure what was being said. The cameras caught a glimpse of the brief moment, but the words between the two women remained a mystery. Jennifer Aniston smiled and nodded as Angelina spoke to her. Her body language was open, and there was no sign of awkwardness between them. The exchange was warm and casual, as if they were old friends catching up after a long time. It wasn't the dramatic scene that people might have expected, given their past. Instead, it was a quiet moment of connection, something many hadn't imagined would happen. The two actresses seemed completely at ease with each other. There were no cold stares or tense gestures, just a calm conversation between two women who had moved past whatever differences had once divided them. It was clear that they weren't letting the past define their present. As soon as their brief conversation ended, Angelina returned to her seat, and Jennifer continued to chat with the people around her. But the impact of the moment lingered. People online quickly started speculating again. What did they talk about? Was it an apology, an old memory, or simply a kind word of encouragement? In the end, the exact details of their conversation would remain a mystery, but it was clear that the two women had found a peaceful moment of understanding. They were no longer defined by the drama of the past, and in that brief exchange, they showed that they had moved on. For those watching, it was a small but significant moment, one that spoke to the power of reconciliation and growth. It reminded everyone that sometimes the most important moments are the quiet ones that happen behind the scenes. As soon as the brief exchange between Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston was caught on camera, the reaction on social media was immediate. Fans, who had been eagerly following every moment of the Oscars, quickly started sharing their thoughts, theories, and speculations about what had just happened. The cameras had caught the two women talking, but no one could hear what was said. This only made the mystery even more intriguing. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with excitement. Fans from all over the world shared clips, trying to decipher what the actresses were saying. Lip readers jumped in, attempting to piece together the conversation. Some people thought they could see Angelina whispering something like, "You look beautiful tonight," while others believed it was a more serious conversation, perhaps about their past or even a deeper apology. No one really knew for sure, but that didn't stop the theories from spreading. People began digging into the history of Jennifer, Angelina, and Brad Pitt. The internet had been buzzing for years about the complicated relationship triangle, and now this small moment seemed to reignite that old flame of curiosity. For many, it was a chance to revisit the drama of the past and try to figure out if this conversation between the two women was a sign of something bigger, a resolution, a healing, or even just a friendly chat between two people who had moved on. The hashtag started to trend. #AngelinaNgen was everywhere, with people posting their own thoughts on what the interaction meant. Some fans felt that the moment showed how much both women had grown. They were no longer the subjects of a bitter love triangle. Instead, they were two women who were simply enjoying the night, showing that there was no more bad blood between them. Others were skeptical and wondered if there was more to the conversation than what met the eye. The media jumped on the story too. News outlets, eager to report on the latest celebrity drama, began covering the exchange, quoting fans and sources who speculated about the conversation. It was clear that this quiet moment between the two actresses had captured the attention of people around the world. Everyone wanted to know what was said. Was there more to this story? Or was it simply a friendly, casual chat between two colleagues? But through all the online chatter and media coverage, one thing was clear. Both Angelina and Jennifer had remained calm throughout the evening. They didn't let the public attention get to them. They had their own moments to enjoy at the Oscars, and while social media buzzed with questions, the two women showed that they had moved beyond the drama and were focused on being present in the moment. For the rest of the night, the whispers and theories continued, but the truth about their conversation remained a mystery. The internet had no answers, but it didn't stop the speculation from continuing. It was clear that the story wasn't over yet. Fans would keep watching, waiting for the next clue about what really happened behind the scenes. As the Oscars ceremony continued into the evening, the excitement surrounding the moment between Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston showed no signs of dying down. Fans, reporters, and social media users kept discussing the brief exchange between the two actresses, each coming up with their own theories about what had been said. The hashtag #AngelinaNgen was still trending hours later, and people were still glued to their screens, analyzing every second of footage. However, neither Angelina nor Jennifer publicly commented on the conversation, choosing instead to stay focused on the event. Both women had their own reasons for being there. Angelina was an actress, a humanitarian, and someone who had worked hard for her recognition in Hollywood. Jennifer, too, was a beloved actress who had spent years in the public eye. Despite their past relationship with Brad Pitt, they each had their own stories to tell, and that night, they both chose to keep their attention on their work and the celebration of films. For the rest of the evening, the cameras captured them interacting with other people. Jennifer laughed and smiled with her friends, while Angelina remained calm and composed, chatting with those around her. Neither of them seemed distracted by the buzz happening online. It was as if they had moved on, choosing to leave the past behind them and focus on the present. Meanwhile, Brad Pitt's win for Best Supporting Actor added another layer to the already intense media coverage of the night. His fans were overjoyed, and the applause for him was loud and genuine. Brad's acceptance speech was warm, humorous, and gracious, and there was no hint of discomfort about the seating arrangement or his ex-wife's decision to move. His behavior on stage and off was consistent with the calm and composed image he had built over the years. Even though the world had watched his marriage to Jennifer Aniston and his subsequent relationship with Angelina unfold under the spotlight, Brad was now a respected figure in Hollywood who didn't seem to let the past affect his present. Backstage, the buzz was still ongoing. Celebrities and reporters were talking about the night's events, and some whispered about the interactions between Angelina, Jennifer, and Brad. But in the midst of the rumors, the truth was clear. The three were professionals in their own right. They had all carved out their own space in Hollywood and were there for the same reason as everyone else: to celebrate the art of filmmaking. As the night came to a close, the cameras captured the usual celebratory moments: people hugging, congratulating each other, and enjoying the after-parties. The buzz about the quiet conversation between Angelina and Jennifer slowly began to die down, replaced by other stories from the night. Yet, for those who had been following the evening closely, the moment would linger for a while longer, a reminder of how public figures often have to navigate their personal lives in the spotlight. The Oscars were over, but the conversation was far from finished. Fans continued to discuss what had happened, but for Angelina, Jennifer, and Brad, the night had been a reminder that they were no longer defined by their past relationships. They were now individuals with their own legacies to continue building. The morning after the Oscars, the buzz around the event still hadn't faded. Social media was still filled with conversations about the quiet moment between Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston. Fans continued to analyze their exchange, but both women had chosen to remain quiet about it. They had left the public to guess at the meaning of their brief conversation, and it seemed that neither was interested in adding fuel to the fire. For Angelina, the Oscars were just another professional milestone in her life. She had been in the industry for decades, achieving success both as an actress and a humanitarian. Her decision to quietly move away from her seat next to Brad Pitt hadn't been a dramatic statement. It had simply been about her comfort. She had always been a private person, and her actions at the Oscars showed that she was no longer interested in engaging with the past. Angelina was focused on her present and her future, not the old stories that the media and fans liked to dig up. Jennifer Aniston, too, seemed to have moved on from the drama of her past with Brad and Angelina. She had built a successful career of her own, and the quiet conversation with Angelina had been nothing more than a simple exchange between two women who had found peace with their history. In the end, they both seemed to be doing well in their respective lives. Jennifer was still adored by fans for her role in Friends and her continued work in film and television, while Angelina had used her fame to bring attention to important causes around the world. Brad Pitt, of course, had his own way of handling the night. Winning an Oscar was a major achievement in his career, and he handled it with the grace and humility that had become his trademark. Despite the tension from the past, he never let it show. Brad had become a respected figure in Hollywood, and it was clear that he didn't want to let any personal history overshadow his professional life. His win was a testament to his dedication to his craft. As the weeks went on, the attention surrounding the Oscars began to die down, but the media still couldn't resist discussing the past. The story of the three ex-spouses continued to generate headlines, but it was obvious that they had all moved on. What had happened at the Oscars that year was just another chapter in a long, complicated story that had long since been written. For all three of them, it was clear that they had reached a place where they were no longer defined by their past relationships. They had each built their own separate paths, and it seemed like the days of media drama and public spectacle were behind them. What the Oscars had proven was that they could be professionals, capable of attending major events and celebrating achievements without letting old wounds reopen. And so, life went on. The world of Hollywood continued to turn, and the three actors went back to their careers, their personal lives, and their own journeys. For the public, the drama had been exciting for a moment, but for Brad, Jennifer, and Angelina, it was just another reminder that time has a way of healing old wounds, and eventually, everyone moves forward.